Setting is one of the main pillars of a good story. I have read dozens and dozens of stories from new authors, and the amount of times that I've read people going through generic medieval town and doing generic medieval things is mind-numbing. While there can be really great stories in those settings, in this video I want to push people to try out some of these settings because I think this is where we can be the most imaginative. Look at something like Mortal Engines. You have moving cities that are eating each other. On Terry Pratchett's Discworld, you have a planet on like a cosmic elephant on a cosmic turtle. On something even like Yu-Gi-Oh, you have a neo-futuristic Tokyo with magical dark pharaohs that are influencing a card game.
Some of the most classic stories, they don't necessarily have groundbreaking settings, but they can be different enough that you are intrigued by them and you're interested in them. Setting isn't necessarily going to make a good story on its own, but it can certainly set up one. One that isn't that interesting is usually lacking inspiration.
A really great setting is not just where a story happens, it shows to the reader why the plot is happening the way it is. There are three main things that encapsulate what makes a really great setting, and the first one is that setting is not just the scene, it is everything that goes beyond it. Setting is culture, it's environment, it can be your star systems, your technology. Now I do want to be careful when I say this because there are certain writers that this is almost too daunting by saying all of these things. There's something that is lovingly in the community called world builder's disease, where a writer can see all of these opportunities for setting and go down these paths and never actually write the book. They're just writing basically a lore Bible. But for the people that struggle to give your settings depth, look at the people in your life and all of the different jobs that they have and all of the different avenues that humans are unique. Look at all the different paths of health and of sciences and of histories. All of these different things are interesting ways that you can take your setting and give your story depth and differentiate it from everything else that's already out there.
And just like the world building elements, setting is also going to affect the conflict. If you were to switch your setting out with any of the other general settings, but keep your conflict the same and nothing has really changed, then perhaps your setting is a little shallow or maybe needs some more depth. Great settings, they usually are inseparable from their story. I think about Dune. The ecology, the planets, that stuff is inseparable from the conflict. They're all interwoven. Everyone wants the spice connected to the world, and so the plot and the world are just part of the same thing. That is really interesting. That's engaging. Just remember that this is a living, breathing thing that you, the author, have come up with. Setting is more than just the canvas that you throw things on. It also needs to interact with the plot and characters.
The third thing that makes a great setting is realizing that setting is a lot about perspective. We talked about this a little bit already when we were talking about point of view, but your setting is not just some objective thing that is complete fact. A lot of setting is how your characters interplay with the scene that's around them. In Toy Story, when they are going through Sid's room, a normal adult walking through Sid's room, it would be almost boring or a tad odd. But from the perspective of the toys, it's almost like a horror movie. It's incredibly intense because you are looking at the setting through the toy's eyes. Realize this when you're creating your setting and look at your characters while you're designing these things. Something that could be really boring to one character could be incredibly intense to another. Position your setting and your characters this way that they rub against each other in really, really interesting ways.
Now, you might be thinking, how can people connect with stuff that's really weird or out of this world or too unfamiliar? And that's totally fair. I think that you can go way overboard with some of this stuff. You completely lose the audience because they have nothing to attach to. I wanted to go over a couple of examples in the fantasy and science fiction space. Places that are good to start with or to remind yourself. In the fantasy realm, you start with the most popular medieval Europe style. Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, everyone knows this type. Then you also have urban or also portal fantasies. Think like Dresden Files, Harry Potter, Neverwhere. They have a familiar starting point like London, and there's usually some other magical or fantasy world or area. Then you have steampunk. Think Perdido Street Station. This is a really weird book, but it's really cool at blending normal regular place with a lot of odd tech and biology as well. And then you also have like the Dying Earth type, post-apocalyptic, Fifth Season, or Shadow of the Torturer. What's interesting with all of these that I mentioned, there's a plot consistency that sort of buds from each of them. Medieval Europe style, you have like this ancient evil, it's large scale, it's epic fantasy. Something like with the Portal fantasy, usually it's like a secret society type. And then in the science fiction space, you have things like near future, or it's galaxy spanning, or cyberpunk style. Some of these settings, they actually kind of lean into their plot structures or plot interest a little more than others. So you can try slotting in one of these plot consistencies into a different setting and see what kind of story you get. It might be a really fresh, unique take.
There are a few ways to make settings much more interesting. The first and most obvious way is the conceptual approach to settings. This is probably the hardest to do because it requires you as the author to make this entire world and make all of these different unique things that the reader can dive into. But these are the stories that people can just lose themselves in. Good examples of this are something like Avatar or Way of Kings, Perdido Street Station, or Ambergris.
The next way to make settings more interesting would be origins. In this sense, you can explore not only how the world is functioning and some of the depth there, but you can explore how the world was created. You can talk about things like gods, lost cultures, think about family trees. When we talk about origins, people like Tolkien and George R.R. Martin are coming to mind because they did such extensive work on the people and culture side of things. Everyone's connected, everyone has families. With Lord of the Rings, you can trace Aragorn way back in his lineage. And you can do that for so many of the characters. I mean, Tolkien even made a language around his people and his story. And he actually says that's how he started the story, was through a language, through Elvish. And so that is a way that you can make an origin for your story. This gives it so much depth, and then the setting can sort of bloom from that. You can sort of imagine what type of people would inhabit XYZ place.
The third way to make your setting more interesting is the specificity route. If I had to choose one, this is my favorite way to approach setting. Instead of having this wide lens and seeing everything in the world, you choose one thing and really zoom in onto that one topic. Most humans don't just know everything about the world that they live in. They usually have one focus. A doctor will know about medicine. A musician will know about music. If you can really zoom in on one aspect of your story and really give it the attention it deserves, sometimes that's even better than having this big wide world. Examples of this are Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind, where you have a character that's a musician and you can really dive deep into the world of being a traveling bard and having to find sponsors and doing musical concerts at pubs and all of these things. Another example of this is Apothecary Diaries. Apothecary Diaries is really interesting because the world itself is really not that crazy different, but because you're zoomed in on one character who is a concubine for a king, but is super specifically knowledgeable about medicines and herbs, you get to see the world of poisons and you get to see the world of diseases and how she comes up with ways to fix these problems. One of the ways to really differentiate yourself from other stories is to find something that you're super passionate about and look at the setting that you've created through that lens. If you're really passionate about cooking, see what you can do with a chef character or something in a world and give it that perspective that we haven't seen before.
Along those same lines, this could even be something that you're not familiar with and you want to learn more about. Create a character that would then grow alongside this topic that you've chosen, or maybe you create a master character once you find out more about the thing you've chosen.
If you are really struggling to make these settings, don't feel bad about it. Setting is not one of these things that I, as a writer, excel at. But here are some ways that you can inspire yourself and give yourself almost prompts that you can build a world off of if it doesn't come naturally to you. The one that I use the most often is I will change one rule of the world and extrapolate across that one rule being changed. What if gravity stopped working one day out of the week? Or what if everyone shared all of their thoughts all the time? Or what if people never stopped growing? You can take that one rule that you're changing and see how that would change the culture and the architecture. You can extrapolate all of these things by just this one thing that you're changing and see how that creates this completely different world based on just one small change.
Another interesting thing you could try is combining ideas. So think about aliens can meet fantasy dungeon crawling, or pirates and magic, or guns and magic in the Powder Mage trilogy. So I wanted to give some examples of how you can take a familiar world like we've been talking about, but then injecting it with something a little more unfamiliar. Take, for example, Mistborn. Without eating metal, one of the magic systems within the world, a lot of that setting would feel a little familiar.
For a lot of people, I know that Mistborn was one of their first fantasy novels that got them back into reading, and I think a lot of the reason for that is allowing for that really interesting stuff, but also having the familiarity where they don't feel too overwhelmed.
Another one is a biology shift. We mentioned Perdido Street Station. It's a very weird, odd book, but it really leans into how odd the biology can get when you combine different species. And also, Children of Time was an interesting one that took on a more evolutionary biology perspective, where spiders essentially start from regular spiders to a hyper-intelligent civilization. And another one would be like a system or industry found in Babel. It's set in a familiar place, it's Oxford, but here the magic system is language-based. And so just taking like this one example or this one thing about language, and you have a whole interesting school that was built around it, and all these characters want to learn more about language, and they all become linguists and studying all these different languages of the world. Even though it's in a familiar setting, it's very interesting to read about.
While plot and character and themes are some of the things that really bind us to a story, to me, setting is where I fell in love with stories. When I was a kid and I was reading these stories and just got consumed by these worlds and these settings that couldn't exist anywhere else other than in the pages of a book. And this is not a call to throw out all the taverns and all the wizards and all that D&D setting that we all love and adore. Just look at them a little bit differently. And maybe when you're writing your next story, push yourself out of your comfort zone and really look at the world that you're putting your characters in and see if you can push it farther than you thought you could. There are certain stories that could never exist in a typical medieval town. When you have the same settings over and over again, you fall into the same stories that have already been told. Break out of these settings that everyone is using and find stories that no one else is telling.
So we want you to imagine how all these well-known places or ideas, they can have nuance within them if you just dare to imagine and explore what could be rather than just cling to what you've always known. Consider the strangeness in some of the works that we've mentioned and find some of your own. Take some time to look at what you love and what has been made classic. You can't make a classic without first finding out what has already become a classic. The next weird could be the new normal. You never know what different things you can combine that are familiar that end up making something completely different and unique. So that'll about do it for us. We will see you next time. Bye.
Hey guys, if you really like this video, check the one down below. You might like that one too.
And if you really like what you see, click here to subscribe.